Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Blue Bottle. An ordinary excavation being done in the city of Kingston upon Hull, or known locally as just Hull, turned a little bizarre. A team of archaeologists were digging up bodies in the old Trinity Cemetery when they came across one skeleton unlike the others. This strange skeleton was buried with a mysterious blue bottle sitting between its legs. The bottle contained a creepy, sludge-like liquid, puzzling the researchers and reporters who learned of the find. What was the weird blue bottle for? There was an inscription on the glass bottle that said Hull Infirmary. This suggests the bottle had been placed there on purpose by staff of the ancient infirmary. A little bit of research showed that the skeleton belonged to a woman who died sometime in her 60s after suffering from rickets and osteoporosis. But that still doesn't explain why such a creepy vial of liquid was placed between her legs. Archaeologists gave the bottle over to some scientists for testing. They discovered the presence of potassium, phosphorus, and sodium. In other words, this was quite possibly a bottle of urine. When this woman died, the workers at the infirmary placed the blue bottle, perhaps containing urine, between the legs to take to the afterlife. Or it could have also been a mysterious phosphate-based tonic used in the 19th century for curing ailments. Either way, it was strange. It was also exceptionally weird because out of the over 1,500 skeletons that were exhumed from the cemetery, she was the only one with such an artifact. Number 9. Estranged Burial. On the small island of Chapelle-Domhue, located in the English Channel off the coast of Guernsey, archaeologists made a creepy discovery. An archaeological dig of just 3 weeks resulted in the unveiling of a dead porpoise. Researchers didn't find the tomb of a mysterious king or a warrior, but instead the elaborate grave of a medieval ocean mammal. Archaeologist Philip de Jersey from Oxford University told local news it was very peculiar. Even after digging up the porpoise, he and his colleagues had no idea what to think of it. Even now, they don't understand why the ancient islanders went through all the trouble of burying a porpoise. And it wasn't like they just buried it in the ground and forgot about it either. This animal wasn't disposed of like the dead family pet in the backyard. It was laid to rest in a proper Christian burial. While excavating, before they actually saw the body of the animal, the archaeologists thought they were digging up the remains of a medieval monk. Here's a bit of background on the island itself. It was used as a religious retreat for monks during the 14th century. Archaeologists have indeed found the tombs of monks on the island, and yet there is no way the porpoise was killed for food, as people didn't really tend to eat them back then. They have no good explanation for why the porpoise was buried with just as much care as a person. Why do you think that was? Let me know your theories in the comments. Number 8. The girl with the finch in her mouth. In southern Poland, archaeologists were excavating a mysterious cave in 1967 when they came across the burial of a young girl. She died about 300 years ago. But what makes this confusing in itself is that people had generally stopped burying their dead in caves back in the Middle Ages. But even more unusual and shocking to the confused experts was the fact that she was discovered with the head of a finch in her mouth. Out of every skeleton ever found in Europe, this is the only one with the head of a bird stuffed into their mouth. There are no other examples of this anywhere. And to make things even creepier, the girl was only between the ages of 10 and 12 when she died. Researchers analyzed her bones, discovering signs of arrested growth. This means she may have suffered from a metabolic disease, but there is no evidence of trauma, no sign of stab wounds, and no obvious cause of death. Maybe she was poisoned. She may also have been strangled or suffocated. It's just too hard to say for sure. As for the bird head in the mouth, that's something nobody can even guess at. The experts are stumped and a little grossed out. Number 7. Pickled fetus. A team of researchers from the University of Warsaw discovered the presence of an unborn child inside the belly of a female mummy. As if that wasn't strange enough, they discovered that the fetus had been pickled inside her abdomen for over 2,000 years. Because of the acidification as this woman decomposed, her baby was pickled and perfectly preserved. This is now the first mummy ever found embalmed with a fetus inside. She was removed from Egypt way back in December of 1826 and donated to the University of Warsaw. But it wasn't until recently that researchers were able to use CT scans and X-rays that they found the fetus. Otherwise, they would have had no idea it was there. Very little is known about the mummy herself. We don't know who she was or where she came from. Not even the location of her tomb is known. This was during the 1800s when she was taken, a time when foreign explorers were robbing Egyptian mummies left, right, and center. She likely came from a royal tomb in Thebes, probably buried in the 1st century BC. She was between 26 and 30 weeks into her pregnancy at the time of her death. Number 6. Mysterious graves. About 1400 years ago in Europe, people practiced something very unusual. They developed a habit of reopening graves and removing things almost immediately after burial. Cemeteries throughout all of Europe, from Transylvania in the east to England in the west, have shown evidence of this strange behavior. Graves were opened and manipulated in what archaeologists initially mistook for grave robbing. But after analyzing a series of excavated cemeteries from 5 regions in Europe, they found it had nothing to do with grave robbing. Instead, the people who reopened the graves carefully selected which possessions they removed while leaving behind plenty of valuables. Researchers from Stockholm University say the most popular objects to be removed from graves were women's brooches and men's swords, but they would leave behind all kinds of precious metal objects like gold and silver jewelry. Most of the things taken from the graves were of no value, either practically or economically. Researchers are still struggling to figure out why this happened. The reopening of the graves probably had some kind of symbolic meaning, but it's difficult to say exactly what that symbolism was. One of the main theories is that people were taking back grave gifts that had been passed on as heirlooms, things that may not have been worth much, but connected family members. Like if you were buried with an old watch that had been in the family for centuries. Perhaps because of the sentimental value of these objects, they were removed and passed on to someone else in the family. Number 5. Porridge beer. A new study has identified a rather bizarre drink that Egyptian elites enjoyed 5,800 years ago. Researchers checked out fragments of pottery found at the ancient city of Hierakonpolis in southern Egypt. They found traces of beer, but this wasn't any ordinary beer. It was as thick as porridge and probably disgusting. The vessels they analyzed were used for transporting beer in bulk. They were enormous, made of fine clay, and reserved only for the elite members of society. Beer almost 6,000 years ago was not for everyone. It was a symbol of status and authority, but it was also pretty horrible. This beer was made primarily from wheat, barley, and grass. It had a very low alcohol content and was thick and cloudy like swamp scum. If you had the chance, would you taste this ancient Egyptian porridge beer? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 4. The Cappuccino Crypt. The Cappuccino Crypt in Czech Republic is one of the creepiest burial sites in the world. It's here where monks were mummified and interred over a period of 300 years, up until the 18th century. The crypt itself is located in the underbelly of Brno's Capuchin Church. The only way into the vault is by navigating a series of winding passageways deep in the dank underground. Once inside the crypt, the bodies of the monks can be seen lined against the walls, not stuffed in tombs or buried in coffins. They were simply laid out on the floor with their heads resting on bricks and their arms crossed across their chests. One of these mummies is a woman frozen in a horrifying pose. Archaeologists believe she was buried alive by accident because she suffered from paralysis, but the monks at the church didn't understand what it was. They put her in a coffin, she starved to death, and then they put her body in the crypt. What's really interesting is that the mummification wasn't even on purpose. The monks reused a single coffin for funerary rites. After the public funeral, the dead would be placed into the crypt, and the dry air helped preserve the bodies for hundreds of years. There are 24 monks down here still, clad in their robes and draped with rosaries. Number 3. Ancient poisoning. 5,000-year-old bones have revealed the very first case of poisoning. These bones were discovered in Spain with alarmingly high levels of mercury. Researchers looked at the skeletal remains of over 370 individuals in the area who were alive during the Copper Age. This was between 2900 and 2600 BC. The high levels of mercury likely resulted from contact with cinnabar, a mercury sulfide mineral which forms in thermal and volcanic regions. When crushed, cinnabar turns into red powder, and this red powder was used for all kinds of things in the ancient world. Humans in the Copper Age used red pigment in paint, inhaled it as part of a hallucinogenic drug ritual, and accidentally poisoned themselves with it. These primitive humans obviously didn't know the dangers of mercury. We didn't even know about the dangers of lead until a few decades ago. Researchers think people who were inhaling the powder to get high, or people using it to make art, ended up dying as a result of it. Some people had 400 parts per million of mercury in their bones. According to the World Health Organization, the normal level of mercury should not exceed 1 or 2 parts per million. They probably had no idea what was happening, but they were suffering from mercury poisoning, a pretty miserable way to spend your final days. Spain may have seen a mass outbreak of mercury poisoning before they finally figured out it was the pigment that was causing it. Number 2. Part of an ancient skull. In the Rising Star Cave, located in South Africa's Johannesburg, researchers discovered the partial skull of a child who died 250,000 years ago. The child wasn't quite human, but a member of the Homo naledi species. The team discovered only a fragment of her head, as well as a couple of teeth. At her time of death, the girl was only between 4 and 6 years old. The truly creepy part is the fact that she was found in a remote passage of the cave system, in a dark, gloomy pit of dirt and rock. Nobody even knows what happened to the rest of her bones, as researchers couldn't find anything except her skull fragments. It looks like the young girl wandered off on her own into the recesses of the cave and lay down on the dusty floor to perish. Professor Lee Berger, project leader, says she belonged to a very primitive species. She existed at the same time as more modern hominin species in Africa, yet there is little known of the Homo naledi. They appear to have been primarily cave dwellers. It's unclear when this species went extinct, how long they existed, or even how many there were. So many ancient ancestors of humans were wandering around Africa between 3 million and 10,000 years ago, it's almost impossible to keep track of each. Scientists are still working to figure out how all these ancient species interacted with one another and what caused each one to vanish, ultimately leading to the rise of humans. Number 1. Chinese mummies. In northwest China, researchers discovered hundreds of mummified corpses buried in boats. This wasn't anywhere near the ocean, but in the middle of a barren desert. The burials began in 2000 BC in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. The burials were done between 4100 and 3700 years ago and were discovered at the beginning of the 20th century, a total of 13 corpses, now known as the Tarim mummies. Because of where they were buried in the dry desert, the dead became mummified all on their own. When modern archaeologists found them, they still had their hair and clothing intact. It was a miraculous look into the past, at a distinct culture that lived in the desert. The structures that contained their remains were shaped like boats and covered in cowhides. They even used oars as grave markers. What's really strange is that this practice has only been seen before with the Vikings. And yet these were ancient North Eurasians, a group that spread into this part of China about 10,000 years ago, near the end of the Ice Age. The genetic lineage of these people can be directly connected to the indigenous population of North America and Siberia. While mummies are creepy and the people themselves were very mysterious, it's the fact that they were buried in boats that has archaeologists scratching their heads. They didn't live near water, they had no use for boats, and yet they used them in their burials. This was the last community in the world you would expect to do such a thing, and yet they did. Thanks for watching! Which of these weird archaeological discoveries creeped you out the most? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button before you go. See you later!